Hey, so this is my fourth video in my series talking about Voyager episodes that I saw about a billion times as a kid, but then first time I saw them as an adult, they took on a whole new life. In my last video, I talked about persistence of vision and how it seems like a metaphor for those times in life when we become especially vulnerable to our own intrusive thoughts and feelings. This video, I'm going to be talking about the Thaw, one of the most ostensibly metaphorical episodes in all of Star Trek, you might say. After all, the villain of the episode is fear itself, or the clown. One of the most interesting things to me about this metaphor, though, is that it ends up, as seeming to me at least, kind of hard to see the clown actually as a mere personification of fear. And I'll explain what I mean by that in a minute. But before that, let's just take a minute. And in case you haven't seen the Thaw in a while, here's the 20-second version. Voyager comes across a planet. They pick up an automated transmission that says, hey, our planet was destroyed in a natural disaster, so a handful of us survived by going into stasis to wait it out for 15 years. Please don't interfere with our timetable. So Voyager scans the planet. They find the stasis pods deep underground. But as Chakotay says, their timetable ended 4 years ago. So they go ahead and beam the pods on board to try to figure out why these aliens are still in stasis way after their timetable ended. And the only way they can find to communicate with these people is to pull out the two corpses out of the two pods where the people died, and then send in B'Elanna and Harry. So once they're in stasis, they can try to communicate with the others in whatever kind of virtual world the computer system has been creating for all these people. And once they do that, they find out that the reason no one has made the call to come out of stasis is because they're all living in this virtual world that's ruled by this clown who basically is fear. And then the rest of the episode is trying to get them out of there. So back to my earlier comments. So one of the interesting things to me about this metaphor is that it's difficult for me to see the clown as a personification of fear. For example, if we saw a personification of anger in some show, we would expect anger to be kind of angry, or at least to be very bold and insistent, maybe a large, with big feet, and he stomps around. If we saw a personification of sadness, we'd expect him to move kind of slowly, be kind of quiet, whatever. But the clown, who is fear, certainly isn't showing us fear by acting afraid. He's the exact opposite. But then what's more, his portrayal doesn't seem to tell us a lot about the human emotion of fear, despite the fact that both Tuvok and the captain have lines of dialogue that imply, or monologue, that imply that this is fear and we should be able to analyze him as human fear. So it's true that human fear can hold you captive. And the clown was holding his victims captive. That's true. But the metaphor kind of seems to fall apart a little bit when the clown says in his very memorable, very important line, he says, my only demand is to exist. That one part when they're trying to negotiate with him, and he says, my only demand is to exist. And that's his thing. It's his main thing. But human fear, on the other hand, its only demand is that you keep it from existing by avoiding the source of fear. So fear's primary demand, real fear, is that you escape the source of fear, and ideally that you put it out of existence as soon as possible. That's its demand. In my opinion, there's very little in the actions of the clown or in Janeway's monologues about the clown as fear that will actually show you how to overcome, let's say, anxiety or traumatic stress or phobias. So if that's the case, then why is it that I personally enjoyed watching this so many times, if that's the case? For me, I think it's because even if the clown isn't a personification of fear, the way some lines imply that it should be, even though that's not the case, the rest of the episode is an intriguing and compelling invitation to the watcher to think about fear, and it lets you see colorful depictions of fear that provoke thought in a number of very interesting ways. First off, there's the backdrop of fear, which we don't see on screen, but is very important to the story. This backdrop is the fear that the aliens who are trying to survive the destruction of their planet, by going into stasis for 15 years, their fear as they go into stasis, just hoping that their technology is going to keep working and no aliens are going to come show up and try to intrude on their timeline, like they said in that message. Please don't, So, that context is like you picture them going into that, and it's like, okay, well, say hello to anxiety, and that's important to the story as we go on. So that's the first thing that stands out. Second, we see fear throughout the episode in the expressions of the characters, and I think that's really well done. The three aliens, and especially Viorsa, allow us to see the real visualization of fear, which is seen through them. I think especially Viorsa's haunted look that he has throughout the episode is just absolutely one of the most memorable aspects of the episode. And then third, we see fear used throughout the episode as a weapon. Fear is used by the clown to control and threaten others. It's especially notable how the clown uses fear in conjunction with his keen awareness of his victim's inner world and his victim's private fears. How he uses them together in a pretty deadly way as kind of as a stereotypical manipulative bully to wield the weapon of fear. So those are three vivid ways that we do see fear in the episode. And what makes those three things work in the episode so well is that all three are interconnected. So if you remember, when the crew was first studying the pods after they discovered them, they beamed them on and they were studying them and trying to see what's going on here. Well, their scans suggested that the people in the pods, through I forget if it was brain scans or what, but they've it seemed like they were experiencing something like a dream state, according to Harry or whoever was sharing this information. But then on more investigation, they concluded it must be more like a holodeck program, more than that than a dream, because there's this feedback going on with the computer. And apparently this is how the aliens are free to choose to end stasis whenever they want. But that doesn't mean we should forget about the dream state concept, because remember how once they went inside, once Harry and B'Elanna went inside, the aliens inside told them the origin of the clown. They said that the clown came into existence gradually as an accidental result of their own fears becoming materialized in the program. So fear the clown isn't a personification of fear in an allegorical sense, not first and foremost at least, but instead he's more like that nightmare that you had at night because you went to bed scared. He's not a personification of fear. He's an embodiment of fears that these characters had. And much like your dream state at night might give expression to your feelings of fear by spontaneously creating this story that's going to give a context for your fears and with an alternate set of facts in the dream world. We all experience that, where it's like your brain makes up this story to go along with these emotions. Well, in the same way, seems like the clown came into existence to give the aliens a visible source of fear instead of the actual source of their fears. Okay, well, what kinds of fears and anxieties would that have been then? Which would these things have been that ended up then emerging into the clown? You might think, well, probably some fear related to being out of control, since these aliens have been, they're stuck inside these stasis pods, powerless to interact with the outside world. You might think, well, maybe some fear about being taken advantage of while vulnerable, because once again, they're stuck in there. And remember how they sent out their request, their transmission that said, please don't interfere with our timetable. That's kind of implying that they realize they're in a very vulnerable state. And then you might add to that, well, maybe also some fear about the great what if, because we've always got, anyone with any anxiety, it's about the what ifs a lot of the time. And they probably got a lot of anxiety about the what if of, what if they stay trapped down there forever and they're never able to return back to the kind of life they used to know? We'll never get out of this. We'll never survive. And for that matter, maybe Viorsa was specifically ruminating about whether space bullies might come over and take advantage of their vulnerability by bullying them through humiliating and abusive harassment. Whatever the case, it's basically the clown. The clown is everything Viorsa and the others were afraid of, except the difference is he's visible and real instead of being a distant possibility. Just like in a bad dream, all their negative feelings were given a story, and that story was an abusive, psychopathic bully from whom they cannot escape. They are forever trapped, helpless, and vulnerable because of him. We'll never get out of here. We'll never survive. Once I realized all of that, it came to suddenly make so much more sense to me than before, how before I had been trying to think of the clown as merely this personification of fear, which just didn't work for me. And partly because the clown doesn't act anything like fear, stuff like that. But the relation I see between the clown and fear now is not that the clown is fear, even though dialogue pointing in that direction. But rather that the clown, as it would seem, is the source of fear, and the clown uses fear to gain advantage over others. Kind of in a similar vein, I've always felt, ever since first time I saw this as an adult, I've always felt that one of the weak points of the episode is the resolution. Now, certainly it's very nicely done in a theatrical sense. It's a great fun to watch, very emotionally satisfying, and totally epic ending, the kind of, visually unforgettable. But it doesn't seem to answer any questions or tell us anything about human fear, which you would think that'd be the point. While Janeway's monologues near the end there implied she was trying to think of a way to defeat the clown by using her understanding of human fear, but the only point I can think of that she's trying to make in the choice she made, the only point I could think she was thinking of is that deep down fear just wants to get beaten. Okay, I'm not sure exactly how that point is going to be particularly helpful either. On the one hand, how did that really help her to actually defeat the clown? And on the other hand, how does that actually help us in real life about overcoming human fear? If that's the point, it doesn't seem like a very powerful point. It seems, I would suggest, there's a little bit of discrepancy in the episode between the way Janeway monologues about the clown as fear versus the way the rest of the episode portrays the character of the clown. While I love the episode, I think the lines of dialogue where Tuvok or Janeway or the others refer to the clown as fear itself are maybe some of the weak points. And I would say especially that's in the build up to the resolution. Because, while it's implied that Janeway discovered how to defeat the clown by means of her insight into human fear, it seems like it'd be more accurate to say that what really happened, they defeated the clown by appealing to his lust for danger as a psychopathic thrill-seeking bully. A little bit also of appealing to his pride. But really, it seems like they defeated the clown because he is this psychopathic thrill-seeking bully who has this lust for danger, this lust for thrill. And they defeated him that was the lure they gave him. And they used that lure to trick him. So when he says, "You tricked me, it was very un-Starfleet of you," well, I don't think it's particularly un-Starfleet to trick a murderous psychopathic bully, but she did trick him. I think that's really, she didn't figure out human fear. She tricked an evil villain, is really how it was resolved. But, if you're watching the show trying to think about how to overcome a phobia or an anxiety of some kind in real life, the only suggestion, that particular suggestion that fear deep down really just wants to be conquered, I'm not sure that that's particularly helpful taken, just simply on this face of it like that. In order to overcome irrational fears, such as, let's say, a chronic phobia, for a phobia, the number one remedy would be exposure therapy or progressive desensitization, which would, to put that into a metaphor, would be more like defeating fear in many very small battles that are easy to win. So that gradually it shrinks, or he shrinks, fear shrinks and gets weaker. That would be, more for an actual phobia. But what we've got in the episode, it's more like, what if your opponent's not fear itself, but it's a psychopathic bully who wants to use your fear to control you? Well, in that case, you'll need another tactic. And that's why Janeway tricked the bully using the thrill of excitement and novelty as the bait, and then doing an old-fashioned bait and switch. And take that point also and realize it's important to remember, if somebody has chronic anxiety, which is caused by an abusive relationship or any kind of being abused consistently and regularly, it's not fear that needs to be overcome first and foremost. It's the source of fear. And it's, I think, one thing that we learn by looking at the clown. A couple other aspects of this episode that I find intriguing. First, a couple things about the clown and his crew. One of the most memorable aspects of this episode is the kind of choreographed performances of the clown's crew. They're so fun to watch. And I think they also mean something. In the context of the story, we understand that just because the clown and these other images are generated by the same computer. But from an artistic standpoint, I wonder if the creators weren't also expressing kind of a visualization of the dance of abusers, with power. So, for example, abusive individuals who have such social power and ability to manipulate others that they can make it seem to the victim that they've got mind control over everybody around them, because everybody dances the same dance together to protect him or to intimidate the victim or whatever. You could take the same idea and say, what if we're talking about a dictator in a toxic regime, or talking about abusive leaders who got political or organizational power? All those is kind of the same kind of portrait of this source of fear, this person like the clown, who has the power to make it seem like everybody's moving together, like he's got mind control, but he doesn't. So the sci-fi context of a computer program kind of like provides this excuse for the creators to artistically portray the terror caused by seeing everybody moving as one when it should not be happening. So the clown, he moves about as though the other characters are his own arms and legs. Even the scenery obeys his whims. Second, another thing that stands out, intriguing, and is the opacity. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that word right. Opacity, the opposite of being transparent. The opacity of the emotional expressions of the clown and his crew. Whereas the clown knows all about the inner secrets of Harry and others. He's like somebody who can read you really well. But nobody can get a glimpse into the inner world of the clown because he is totally emotionally opaque. He expresses cruelty and malice while smiling, laughing, and acting pleasant. He punishes you with a smile. We tend to fear opaque individuals because we realize that what we think we know about their inner world is often entirely untrue. And we realize that we can't predict their behavior or correctly interpret their intentions. And then this becomes even more frightening when an opaque individual like that learns to see into the secrets and vulnerabilities of people he's willing to exploit. Like, that's exactly what we see in this particular case. And then third, one more interesting thing with this episode is the clown's use of secret knowledge to hit others where it hurts. And this is, I think, maybe, one of the high points, one of the climactic points of the episode is the part where Harry's on the operating table, and the point in that scene where the clown is raising the knife and saying, "I know what you're afraid of." The point isn't that the clown has found something that, finally the clown's got something that's really scary. That's not the point at all. The point is that the clown knew what Harry would find frightening. And I think part of what we're supposed to take away from that, or at least certainly part of what I take away from that, is that everybody has their own unique world and experience. And it's not as big a question of whether so-and-so is going to think your fears are valid. What matters is this is your fear. And for everybody, that's going to be a little bit different. And you're not the only one who has unique reasons to feel a particular fear about unique things. In Harry's case, he, stepped into the wrong room at the wrong time when he was this little kid. And so this seed of whatever you might call that, this kind of tendency that's just inside him. Everyone's got things like that. And so the point I'm trying to make is your battle against your fears is no more or less valid than anybody else's. Because if B'Elanna was in that scene, the clown would have brought out something entirely different, and that would have been legit for her. Another aspect I find intriguing about this episode is just really, and I made reference to this earlier, but the collective performances of those three victims, especially Viorsa. I think this is the real visualization of fear we get in the episode, more so than the clown as the visualization of fear. These three victims portray a defeated, traumatized, learned helplessness in which they've learned over time they can't fight back. What's remarkable is not that they're, not doing very well at trying to outwit the clown. That's not what's remarkable. What's remarkable is that Viorsa was willing to try at all, when he gave them the secret, and then he's kind of lurking in the background with this terrified look on his face, like he knows he's going to be punished. And he's not just going to be punished. He's going to be punished exactly where it hurts, wherever that is for him. The clown knows how to hit where it hurts. Because these three people, they're in a context in which mere thoughts can bring highly personalized retaliation. not unlike, you could compare it to the experience of living in a dictatorial regime where alleged thought crimes could land you in a prison camp. Another aspect too is in the clown's dictatorship, he doesn't challenge beliefs that would undermine his power. He doesn't challenge them by arguing against those beliefs. Remember, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. The only thing we have, the clown doesn't challenge beliefs by arguing against them. He overcomes them by just repeating them over and over in his own voice. He invalidates the beliefs simply by claiming them for his own, and the power they have just evaporates. So anyway, those are some parts of the episode that I find really intriguing. I think that, I started off by, it's almost like I was trying to criticize the episode. I think this is one of the excellent episodes of Voyager. Not excellent because the clown is such a wonderful personification of fear, but excellent because the episode just shows you fear. It lets you think about fear from a lot of different angles and in a lot of different ways, by showing us illustrations of the kinds of things that make us afraid and stuff like that. So those are just some parts of the episode that I find absolutely intriguing, absolutely a blast to watch. But then at the end of the episode, you could suggest, remember that Janeway hologram, face to face with fear. And fear was supposed to be something like a personification. They called him fear the whole way through the episode. You could suggest that at the end of the episode, the Janeway hologram really ends up doing the one thing that we all need to do when haunted by fears. Whether we're haunted by a chronic phobia or by anxieties or by traumatic memories, fill in the blank. She stood face to face with fear. She stood and had a friendly conversation with it and watched it slowly fade. Because facing fears can be difficult. Different kinds of fear definitely need different kinds of approaches, whether it's a phobia or a post-traumatic kind of thing or whatever. But unless we're talking about a case where the fear is a current reality, so if we're talking about living with an abuser, obviously that's different. You got to deal with the current problem first. You can't handle fear. You got to deal with the abuser. But unless we're talking about that kind of thing, facing fears in other contexts, most fear can be gradually and lastingly overcome. It can fade, much like that clown, as Janeway stood face to face, facing her fear, having a friendly conversation with her fear, having a casual, friendly, accepting conversation with her fear. And it can fade, just like that clown slowly, slowly fades into black. So the image the episode leaves us with, that image of Janeway in fear standing face to face, having a pleasant conversation, seems to be just about the most fitting way that the episode could end. And now, like I said, that's going to look different for you, whether you're dealing with generalized anxiety or whether you're dealing with a chronic phobia or whether you're dealing with post-traumatic stress, or fill in the blank of there are other categories, other clinical categories of serious fear, and then there's the less serious kinds. So there's different nuances to what that would look like. But for many of those, that image is a beautiful image that's real to many of us. And so anyway, that's that. Next up in this series, I'll be talking about Mortal Coil, which I think is season 6 or 5, something like that. So next up in this series, I'll be talking about Mortal Coil and about a little bit about what Neelix's brush with death expresses about the human condition, stuff like that. So see you then.